Good afternoon. Stay in the mood, stay in the mood. Good afternoon. Very nice to see this house so packed again. Hello, above there. It's very nice that you're all here, and we are very, very happy to share this precious moment with you, share also the secrets of this very precious moment with you. Warm welcome to the Hauhebeler Mufa. Warm welcome also to Berlinale Talents. And without any further ado, so that you stay in the mood, please welcome Marten Rabarts, the moderator of the session. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Florian. Thank you. Good evening. Marten Rabarts from the Eye Film Museum in Amsterdam, and totally honored to have Gus Van Sant with us. And, introduce you to a man who has the courage to do that. Drugstore Cowboy, Malinoche, My Own Private Idaho, To Die For, Good Will Hunting, Jerry, Elephant, Last Days, Paranoid Park, Milk, The Sea of Trees, and now in Berlin for his latest film, Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot, the rock star of contemporary cinema, Gus Van Sant.
Testing.
Coming from Portland, I probably should have been specific and said the grunge rock star of cinema. Gus, welcome. We have about an hour to talk about, your body of work, the way you approach things, the choices you make, the choices you don't make, and then there'll be a Q&A towards the end. So please, as we go through this, just come with the ideas and questions. And also, balcony 3 up there, hello. So far up, okay. This time this is titled A Place Like Home. Your characters seem to be constantly searching for home or failing to find home, but you yourself, just a précis of who you are. You were born in Kentucky. You moved around the States, I understand. Your dad was moved in different places, but you went to high school in Darien, Connecticut, which in 2018 was listed as the wealthiest city in the USA. The highest, the wealthiest city in terms of the residents there and their incomes. Now, okay, if you'd been visiting schools in Darien back when you were in high school, say casting something like Last Days, and you'd met you, who would you have met? Tell us a little about you as a teenage kid.
Back in the day, in the 60s.
Yeah. Who was that teenage guy who's...
Very sheltered. We had moved around, my family moved around. Since Kentucky, we had moved to Colorado first, Denver, Colorado, a suburb. My father was a traveling salesman, so he sort of worked his way up the company ladder. We lived in Illinois, California, and then finally Connecticut, and then Oregon after that. And if you met me back then, I spent about 7 years in Darien, Connecticut. It was always at that time, it was a very small town, 12,000 people. It was a vacation town of New Yorkers, so it was a wealthy vacation town. Further out was Newport, which was not, it was even a more illustrious vacation town, I think. But we were always scholastically, or I think community-wise, similar to Beverly Hills or someplace like that.
Right. Who would you have cast yourself in Say Elephant? Which of the groups of the school?
Oh,
the geeks, Elephant? The cool guys?
Oh, I know, the secrets come out.
Okay. But then, okay, I
think I was all of them at some point.
In some way or other. You ended up going to Rhode Island School of Design, RISD. You studied painting. You'd been exploring cinema through Super 8 filmmaking, but you committed to major in cinema. What was it that painting lacked that cinema had that drew you across that line?
Well, back in this community, Darien, there was a very influential art teacher named Richard Levine, who was in 1962, which is when I think I first attended school there. I was in junior high school. He was an out gay teacher in 1962 in this very conservative community, and he was getting all the students to get very excited about visual art, and so there was sort of a club that would stay afterwards. They kind of the kids kind of rallied around him, and so I was painting. He was painting as well. The teacher, Mr. Levine, would be painting in class while we were in class. So we saw him painting, and it just sort of made us want to do what he was doing. We were making posters and doing a lot of different types of visual art. Meanwhile, there was another picture, David's teacher, David Sohn, who was an English teacher, but he was very into showing us film, because I think he thought of film as, Marshall McLuhan-esque, like the literature of the day. And he was showing us short films. He showed us Citizen Kane, of all things, and which was very influential, and a lot of short films from the Canadian Film Board. And similarly, all the kids were making films, making short films. I wasn't. I did eventually make one, but when we would tell the art teacher this, he would say, "Well, those are art films." He was very jealous of the English teacher, because he was moving into his territory. But both teachers were very influential, and I was doing both things, painting and filmmaking, like at say 14, 15, 16. And the New York film underground cinema was happening. Jonas Mekas and like all the underground filmmakers were at their height right then. They were making a lot of films, and it was like a thing in New York City. So did you
skip school and take the train into New York?
Yeah, I didn't skip school, but eventually when I was working in New York as a summer job at 16, and I would go to the Anthology Film Archives or the Museum of Modern Art and see a lot of these filmmakers that were making things for with their friends, like Jack Smith or Ron Rice or Jonas himself. I think eventually Warhol was making things.
Right, and then there's a lot of that legacy that you can feel feeds into the work that you've done since. But then you went to the West Coast, to Hollywood. You kind of ran away from home. It was like, I was just wondering, was there a little bit of Scott favor in you, like the boy from the rich side of town who crosses the tracks over to Hollywood Boulevard?
Who goes to Hollywood? No, I don't think so. Let's see. Well, Scott Favor is based on a Shakespearean character, Prince Hal. So I don't think we could ever find the true Scott Favor, because he was royalty, at least in the U.S. Maybe in London we could have found him, Prince Harry. But we literally, in Portland, Oregon, it was very hard. And no, I think Hollywood, when I went to Hollywood, I went as a graduate of Rhode Island School of Design. And
that's not obvious.
No?
No, it's like UCLA, you move down the road to go to Hollywood, but RISD is like a different kind of...
Yeah, but RISD had a film department, and we weren't really learning film perhaps in the same way that UCLA guys were and girls were learning it, but I think the serious filmmakers were headed that direction. They could go to either New York or LA.
Right, but this was the time that you discovered the characters that became much, much later, My Own Private Idaho.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at a clip of actually it's the opening sequence of the entire movie, because it tells us a lot, not just about where we're going in the film, but it establishes quite a bit of your language. So if we could have that clip, please. So you presented that film in Venice as a world premiere.
Yes.
And that house crashing down in an inexplicable way was like an explosion of a new kind of cinema for me when I saw it. The avant-garde had sort of crashed into something that was much more mainstream. At that time, did you know how much you were changing and giving permission to filmmakers to do things that were unexpected, because that house is like, it's seared in my memory as being like a turning point moment in our contemporary cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was coming directly from those filmmakers I was watching in New York. Also, I think it was something we were doing in the editing room with, we had a whole bunch of different things that we had shot, intending it to be something other than what we sort of ended up. We sort of didn't finish the shooting, so we were using the shots in a different fashion than were in the screenplay. And so just putting it right in the middle of an orgasm, I think, was the maybe a choice I made. Like
A serendipitous choice, yeah.
Because the barn was very well done, and the other effects that we had done were very poorly done. So we only had the barn.
It's such a great barn. You kind of wanted to keep crashing all the way through, but
Yeah.
it just like went boom. You're watching something extraordinary. And in a way, after Malanoche, which had already, introduced you to the world, it was saying, yes, I'm here, but this is the way I'm going to do things.
I mean, it was a script that was written after working on it for, I don't know, a really long time, maybe 10 years or something like that, was a draft that was taking many different drafts and sort of boiling them down into one draft, which was actually quite short, but had all these different elements from the different drafts that were I was definitely doing whatever I wanted to do at that moment. Just, there's elements of, I think, probably Samuel Beckett and Sam Shepard,
Right.
in the story, and then there's Shakespeare, and it's all kind of getting
all loaded on
mixed
top
together,
of each other.
yeah.
It was a fusion of really disparate things. What about the clouds? Your signature, like white clouds going across a blue sky, is that what?
In
almost everything you've ever done.
Those were coming from, I think, probably Herzog, watching a couple of different of his movies, Heart of Glass, and then there's also a lot of clouds, I think, in...
But you've really made them your own. Like, I could see almost any film now, and there's a certain kind of cloud passing. I was like, oh, Gus made this.
Yeah.
Music videos.
I had done a senior project in high school where we had a lot of clouds. In Oregon, you have a lot of clouds. And
yeah, but not so many blue skies.
They're moving quite quickly, so it's something you tend to shoot.
It said you took 10 years to get from the idea to making the final version of Idaho. If you'd made that film at the beginning, 10 years, what kind of film would it have been? Because you were developing your language, you were developing your understanding of cinema.
I couldn't tell you. It was in Hollywood. It wasn't in Oregon. The particular draft that I started, because I lived off of Hollywood Boulevard, and there were a lot of street kids on Hollywood Boulevard.
As a screenwriter, you've written exclusively less of your work recently, and then you've also collaborated, evolved scripts on set with actors, with non-actors. Which do you prefer? The scripted, the non-scripted, the evolutionary works?
You mean the ones without scripts?
The ones that start without scripts and end up with scripts once you've worked with the actors.
I mean, I think in the end,
composed
I've figured that it's always a little more rewarding to actually write the screenplay yourself.
In the end.
I mean, after having done many different things and worked with lots of different outside screenplays that came from elsewhere, I think after all is said and done, the ones that I'm writing myself they're more solidly like rewarding in my own.
That's interesting. Okay. What about the process then? Because when you were making things like Jerry or Last Days, and Elephant, you cast particular kids with particular qualities, and you evolved those scripts with them creating the dialogue. Is that a different kind of experience as a director? It's more like a theater piece or performance art that you film?
So I mean, there were different ideas that came at different times. I think the Jerry being the first one was more actually the later concept. It was something that Matt Damon had mentioned at dinner, and Casey was also at dinner, and we said, let's get together and do it. And it was really like a story about two kids from Boston who didn't really, they weren't experienced outdoorsmen, and yet they went on this hike and got lost very quickly. And there was sort of a comic aspect to the idea. And in the end, one of the characters killed the other one in the true story. And there was a mystery as well, an unsolved mystery. And that being the first one, I think that we decided to do it very inexpensively. It turned into something that was a little bigger, but we were going to use just handheld video cameras and go into the desert and make this piece. And I thought it was going to be a little more like John Cassavetes' film or something like that. I wasn't sure. And Casey and Matt were improving ideas, scenes, basically. And I was writing down the concepts. And we were actually typing a script at one point, which we kind of like left behind. But
lost along the way somewhere.
It was used to start fires in the cabin that we were renting, because we needed paper, and we inadvertently had actually burnt the script, the one script that we had, but thinking that it was in the computer, but the computer jammed, so it was like it's a whole story. But the other two films were Elephant being the next one was based on the Columbine high school attack, and it was something that was written out. I wrote out a piece that was about 10 pages long, which was more the motions of the kids in the school, and then the dialogue was improved by those kids. And we had Mally Finn, who was the casting director, and she was very good at getting the people trying out for the parts, getting them improving, just sort of in a matter of a minute or so. She'd be in this very, very intense improv, and that encouraged me to sort of like, realize that the kids trying out, which they were non-professionals, could actually do that, and we just would tell them to talk about what, we would maybe give them something to talk about and an idea, and they would just go. So it was a little different than like
the way
Jerry.
Right. The way you'd been working even on Jerry. So it was an evolution of that. But you had, a language, you had a story, the sequence of shots that are constantly tracking, the changing of time, interweaving that.
Yeah.
So even though there was this very improvisational experience going on for the actors, you had a much more like sharp hold on where you were going with the material. But still you didn't know quite what was going to come up.
Right. We could add, we also shot in order. So by doing that, we could change the story as we, the evolution of the shoot could be altered as we were moving forward, because we were shooting like in order. We never really did alter too much of the story but we could. We knew that we could. That was one of the things about those three films. They were also, I think what happened was in Jerry was sort of the model, and we were thinking about doing it a certain way, and we ended up rehearsing in a very different way, and Casey and Matt's characters were working into a very different thing, and I was reacting more to something that I had seen Béla Tarr from Hungary do in his movie Satan Tango. And I was sort of applying an idea to where we were at the moment. It wasn't going to be, apparently it wasn't going to be like a John Cassavetes talkathon. It wasn't going to be as much talking. but there was still the story that we wanted to tell, and that's sort of where it began, like with the very long, pensive shots.
Which we saw at the opening. How much of the shaping of this material you've gathered in this improvisational way, how important, I guess, is the editing of that? Because it's very, very, actually, Elephant is a very constructed piece. It's solid as a rock. How long did you cut it?
It was not too long, probably about a month or two. You know, it was, we also, all three films, well, not Jerry, because we were in the desert when we shot Jerry, so we were unable to really be cutting. But with Elephant and Last Days, we were actually cutting, I was cutting on the weekends. And since we were shooting in order, we worked 5 days, there were like 15-day shoots. We would shoot for 5 days, I would edit on Saturday, and we would screen the first third of the movie on Sunday. And then the next week, I edited on Saturday, and we would rescreen the first 2/3 of the movie on that Sunday. And then at the last week, we screened the whole movie on the last day. And then there was further editing after that, but and there were changes that happened.
I've got an edit question on Elephant. It's not from me. I was having lunch with a friend who's the editor for Lars von Trier, Molly Stensgaard, and she said, please ask him. There's the moment in Elephant where the narrative arrives in the form of the boys with the bags and the camo gear. So I'm asking on her behalf, how do you judge that moment when you've pushed your audience to sequence after sequence of nothing happening to the point where their tolerance is just about to break down with you? When do you know that, as the director, that's when I'm going to let them know a story's going to happen?
I think we assumed that people would know what we were basing the story on, so that they would already know before they went to the movie. So there was already a certain amount of tension, and then there was the moment, yeah, I think it's probably...
It's where the guys come with the bags and the dog jumps up in slow
25
motion.
minutes
That's
in.
boom, that's it.
Yeah.
But it's quite a long way in.
Yeah, it's longish.
It's a bit
the
like the
beginning of the
opening shot of Jerry. It takes real courage, and it's almost like mesmerizing. It's like a snake.
Yeah.
Bringing your audience so close to the place.
Yeah, I think it was just probably the beginning of the second act, as they say. And it was written that way.
It was written that way, so you felt it was coming. I guess that's the thing about Elephant. It's so seductively free-flowing but it's naturally incredibly managed. When do you start to hear the sound design for the film? Do you do that when you're reading the script? Because so much of your work is informed by the sound design. It's layered deeply and through all of your work. Do you hear the sound in the script?
Yeah,
stage?
I mean, there also with that, I mean, different types of evolution. I used to do a lot of sound mixing myself on recordings that I made that were on a little Porta studio, like a 4-track Porta studio. And I did a lot of music recording as well. But then I think when we started making, when I was able to do Malanoche, I remember I did a low-budget mix. It was the original mix was just done at my house on a desk with this Porta studio and a video tape that had the original, like, a certain high-def track on the tape would go through the mixer and into a Nagra to do the final. The final mix was on a 1/4-inch tape, and it was low budget, but it was something I was just by myself doing. And then the next film, Drugstore Cowboy, was done at with a professional like sound cutter and then a professional like sound mixer.
The real thing.
So I kind of like lost it to them for a little while, but then eventually when we came back to Jerry and particularly Elephant, then I was working with Leslie Schatz, who was had done a lot of Francis Coppola's movies, and he was from San Francisco, and he had become involved, and we edited. I mean, we mixed in San Francisco at Saul Zant's stages, but it was Leslie who had this idea for us to be using, since we were doing such long takes on Jerry. He was visiting the set of Jerry, to use a stereo mic for the dialogue. And so we didn't use a stereo mic for the dialogue on Jerry because he was sort of like there in the middle of the shoot. But on Elephant, we got the chance to do it, and it was kind of bringing everything together with the hallways, which were echoey. The stereo mic and the lavaliers were very echoey. They were also through a series of sort of mistakes. They were the different mics, the lavaliers and the stereo mics were dedicated, like hard panned to like left, right, center. So the actor on the right might actually be coming out of the left speaker, and the actor on the left might be coming from the right speaker, which we decided we liked.
Right, it's sort of a disconnect.
And it's also it's also echoing, and then on top of it, there was the soundtrack is largely musique concrète, which are musical compositions that are made by composers, and yet they're using sound effects, which is a whole discipline in itself that some of you may know about. So that's playing at the same time. So it's like the stereo mics in different speakers, the echoey, and
but
then
it becomes such an essential element of the film itself, its voice. But we've got a clip here that kind of covers, it's two clips actually, one from Paranoid Park and a second clip that sort of back to back from Elephant. Let's see the soundscape clips. Almost a little. It's like hard to clap.
I think that's Frances White. If it's not her, it's Hildegard Westerkamp. I think both are from Canada. They're musique concrète artists, and it's the same. It's like a very similar.
It's the bird's song, it's the trickling water, but it's a juxtaposition with image and what's going inside the heads of the characters you're in close-up on. That's what you do with it. When do you make that choice? And are you conscious that you're doing a certain thing to the audience with adding those sounds to image?
Yeah, I mean, they're happening later, in the process of, during the edit period. So I didn't know, like in Elephant, for instance, that we would ever even use musique concrète. We had brought, Leslie Scott's the same mixer that we used. He had brought together a few recordings, and I also, there was actually a program, a radio program in Portland, Oregon by Richard Francis of musique concrète once every twice every month, and I was a fan of the show, and so Richard Francis had sent us a bunch of recordings that were his favorites, and Hildegard and Francis were part of those recordings. And later, when I was speaking with Leslie, he was a member of the French music union. He was a union French mixer as well as U.S., and he was very familiar with musique concrète. And so in Good Will Hunting, we were actually using it during the fight scene, but it was hard to use it in anything that was cutting in an ordinary way. But later, when we were using these very long takes, it became like at one point during Elephant was just the time to use it. Even though in Jerry, we were actually emulating.
When did you know it was the time to use it?
I don't know, it took a long time, because we didn't even think of it during Jerry. And we were making loops that were emulating a video game in the movie Jerry. And we weren't really making the final connection to
right.
Now is the time for something like this musique concrète idea. But during Elephant, I was just in the editing room, and I just tried it. And it was very intense. It's good.
jazz, classical music, working with Danny Elfman. Do you listen to music all the time? Are you, feeding yourself from outside sources, or does it come to you in the shower? I mean, music is one of those things in cinema that I find quite often directors kind of like, well, and then there's the music. How do I handle that? I remember Jane Campion saying that once in her early work. She was like, the music was the thing that always confused me. I didn't feel confident in. What's been your relationship to music?
I think it's just, it's at RISD during our introduction to film, equipment and so forth. There was this great little sound room in our projection room that we had like a few different recorders, and some of the students were taking, their favorite recording and playing it with their silent movie, and the speakers were very good. So all of a sudden, you had this amazing, whether it was a classical track or a rock and roll track, this sort of amazing film music combination where you were used to watching their film silent, and all of a sudden it would come to life with the music, and that was an inspiration for sure. But I think the decisions of which music to use in my films were it just came from everywhere. In Malanoche, it was one of our assistants had recorded some South American protest songs, and then also our sound person on Malanoche was the drummer of the Neo Boys, which is a punk rock group. So I mean, they were coming from like the crew.
So you're like a collector, constantly collecting.
Yeah. And then sometimes the radio, like you'll just be listening to the radio.
Are you like a hoarder collector,
Like,
taking lots of stuff in and then figuring it out, or?
I'm just sort of collaging things. I'm a collagist, so not really hoarding things, but collaging things.
There's something also that happens with the way you design sound. You kind of give your audience permission to be set free from an entirely naturalistic world. You're kind of saying, okay, guys, it may not happen in linear time. It may not have sound that's connected to what you're seeing on the screen. This allows your audience a certain freedom to dive in and swim with wherever you want to take them. Is that important to you, that we like surrender to the film, because you give us all these like ways to do that?
You mean become like entranced, or?
Yeah, I guess, or mesmerized, or enchanted. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I am. Yeah.
I do it. I guess I must be. But it's very precise and deliberate. You know what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it probably comes from just the things that I am attracted to in daily life, to begin with. Stories that I'm attracted to that either I hear from friends that maybe do that to you, or that you read, stories that you read or overhear. And then as you're working, there is a certain element of kind of, I think, enrapturing the viewer, hopefully.
It works for me. I was there's another thing. You're a great lover of kind of old school cinema effects, analog stuff, flying houses from The Wizard of Oz, dropping into Idaho, and also in Drugstore Cowboy, if you like, clumsily superimposed objects flying through blue clouds and sky. These are things, again, from another era, and I understand, of course, you've already said there's a certain amount of your fascination with this and the roots in the avant-garde from New York. But it's also a sort of clean, uncluttered, sort of reduced technology approach to adding fantasy to the films. Why do you take
Yeah,
us in that direction?
I think that a lot of those films were made before there was like digital technology. And also I think the original images of maybe even the clouds and things floating and the houses crashing were things that I painted in school. My first year at Rhode Island School of Design, I was thinking of majoring in painting, and I kind of bailed because the senior painting students coming back from their attempts to get a show in New York were so discouraging that I thought maybe I should major in something else. And film was like also another attractive thing for me. But at the time, I was painting in a painting class, and I was painting those images. I was painting things flying in the sky, and there were barns and houses crashing into roads. So they kind of came directly from the paintings.
You kept hold of them.
Yeah, they were just in my past. They're something that I relate to. Roads, houses. The house crashing is possibly like just me as a 6-year-old being told that we're moving from our house. And I didn't know what that meant.
And on yet another road.
We're leaving to go to some other city. Was very strange and shocking and, disturbing idea.
Have you processed that through the flying houses and the guns?
I think it's all part of like the...
Well, dealt with it now.
But
I was thinking about some of the people you worked with in cast. There's also, in a way, from a certain past, and you analog actors in a way, or Burroughs himself. William Burroughs, you brought him back into the public eye. Udo Kier, who you continually worked with, had his amazing...
Yeah, who I met here in Berlin, showing Malinoche. Udo walked into a bar, and I had known him through Andy Warhol's Frankenstein and Dracula. And so he sat down at our table, and I asked him to play the part that he eventually played in Idaho, and he said, of course I'll do this, and eventually he did. I was thinking of something else.
You're going to tell us another Udo story?
Or some other casting moment. Burroughs, for instance.
We've got a clip from Burroughs, so
okay.
Let's have a look at the Burroughs clip, and then let's hear that. Thank you. So let's hear how you cast him. But first of all, it's like, what made you think you should, why William Burroughs? Or
I just thought that the DP on this film on Drugstore Cowboy was Robert Yeoman, who ended up doing a lot of Wes Anderson's movies. But Burroughs, there was a part. This is a story written by James Fogle, who was a lifetime robber and drug addict, and he wrote a story loosely based on his friends and his adventures during a period of time when they weren't in jail. Usually they were in jail. When we made the movie, they were in jail, and we visited them in jail. There was a character named Old Tom that we just thought Burroughs would be perfect. And I had made a short film using one of his short stories. So I had met him and was in touch with him and his assistant. I didn't know them that well, but I had done this one project. So we offered him the role, and he said he would do it, but he needed to shoot everything. He requested to shoot everything in one day. So we shot all of his scenes, which were like 7 scenes in one day. And he also wanted us to, instead of making it about this kind of forgotten character named Old Tom, he wanted to kind of upgrade his character as a Gray Panther. He wanted to make him have something going, and so he renamed him Tom the Priest, and he added all the priest things, and he also, along with his assistant, rewrote all of his dialogue.
That was what I was going to ask,
So-
because I was like, you didn't write that.
So a lot of the things that he's saying are things that he's known for saying, and he's written it himself.
And even though it was Drugstore Cowboy, which was much more scripted, it was the beginning of the later works you were doing, which were more improvisational directly.
Yeah, and in this case, they were
Did he
writing.
teach you that?
They were writing it and sending
Yeah.
it to us. They were rewriting scenes and sending us the scenes. So it wasn't really improving so much as like it was. He was doing a pass on his part.
You then made other small art installation works with him or on his work, or there was another. I found them on the internet.
Oh yeah,
Small
well,
pieces.
I did a video
Yeah.
with Burroughs after this film, which is called Thanksgiving Prayer. And then there's the short film, The Discipline of DE, which is
And you continue doing smaller scale projects and photography outside of making another feature film. How much do these pursuits that are perhaps less collaborative, you don't need a massive crew, you can just shoot something, you had your camera around your neck when you came in here, how much of that gives you joy or feeds you? And
there are usually diversions. I mean, I consider myself like an okay photographer. I think one of the things that happened during this Drugstore Cowboy period was I had this black and white Polaroid that I didn't really use a lot, but I started taking casting pictures with it. It became useful for casting pictures. In the particular model of camera, you could find Polaroid that made a film that had a negative inside. So I took all my casting pictures with this camera, and later I made prints and had a show with it, with the photographs. And then there's a book also that came out using those photographs. But it was like a kind of side project.
something to breathe into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all pretty much hobbies, like the side projects.
Looking back through your body of work, there's a contemporary relevance. I mean, I'd argue that in some places it's kind of, you've been prophetic. The way you represent fluid, non-binary sexuality, just placing it here as incidental to a greater story, has almost become like a millennial sexuality. Something that you were proposing as a possibility between people has now been expanded and embraced by a generation, this sort of non-binary kind of connection to sexuality. And I want to come back to that, being a gay director, but not being sort of put into the gay cinema corner, which is a powerful and rich and amazing one. But also Drugstore Cowboy, you could remake it. You've got the opioids crisis on the doorstep right now. And then looking at To Die For again, I was astonished how the entire thing is driven by what we're now casually referring to as the Me Too. Suzanne, the main character in that, played by Nicole Kidman, is sexually assaulted by a senior executive from the channel who's visiting in town in a really, really horrific way. And she turns and does exactly the same kind of seduction to the schoolboy who's in the room tonight. So it was really about the power of sex and abuse. Is that, I mean, it was like a ticking bomb that's only just exploded. And
I thought that she was sort of encouraging the relationship with the executive more than he was, you know, as a way to advance her career, which was the most important thing to her. But yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to a lot of things.
We have a clip of it, but I don't think she was really. I mean, she was incredibly manipulative. But there's something about the moment that you capture in that scene where there's a real disturbance going on in her. But
Yeah.
Anyway, your work is incredibly relevant to things that you feel that are outside you, that are coming to you. How important is that when you say, okay, I'm going to do this film next?
I think, I mean, they're really like I mean, there are things that are perhaps always, current. There are things that are kind of part of just the human condition, that maybe they become, in and out of relevance, but there was no like projection or anything, like into the future, or they're just things that were interesting.
And coming up soon, I believe you're working on We Will Rise, a LGBT rights series.
When We Rise. Yeah.
How's that coming? When We Rise, sorry.
Yeah, that finished and it aired a year ago in the U.S.
Why haven't we seen it?
Maybe someday. It's ABC, but I'm not sure why it hasn't been over here.
I haven't seen it.
It's 5 hours.
Right. You're here, and you'll be leaving soon to present your film that is in selection, but we'll leave that towards the end. Right now, let's just open it up to questions for Gus Van Sant. Questions, please. And up there. I can't see anyone up there, actually. We have mics on each, just here. Could we have a mic, please?
Hello. I've got 2 questions, if that's okay. What do you think are the biggest challenges for queer cinema and filmmakers today? And what do you think queer cinema has left to say?
Just challenges today?
Yeah.
I mean, queer cinema has evolved, just in my lifetime, from something that was like underground. I think when I first went to a gay film festival in Hollywood, it was before really there were any US gay or queer topics. There were films from Europe, they were from Germany, they were from Denmark and Holland and Sweden at these festivals. So it's gone all the way from there as a part of the movement until now we have, many different opportunities, I think, or many different story telling filmmakers and or abilities, like to tell stories. So it's like completely like open today, it seems. Things are so open at the moment in where I'm living now in Los Angeles. I was living in Portland, Oregon, but just because so many companies are for some reason in need of content, and I'm not sure what, they're putting them on their websites like Netflix or Amazon or now Apple and maybe Facebook. There's so much desire for content that there's an opportunity that didn't exist, a long time ago. When I think most of the gay filmmakers were making things just barely making them for the very, very little money.
Thank you.
There's a question here, and then up the back, and over there, and...
I would like to ask how, for you, is it to make independent or art house movies inside Hollywood, and also actually kind of working with big names and people in Hollywood?
I think that I started with Malinoche being my first film. This was the first festival I came to in the Panorama section in 1985. So this is my first festival. And with that movie, I was trying to get the next one going, and I had Drugstore Cowboy was one of the screenplays that I had developed. And it was a gay film festival in Los Angeles that I actually sort of got exposure to the Los Angeles crowd, including a Berlin filmmaker, Christoph Eichhorn, who's also was an actor and is an actor and a filmmaker, who introduced me to his agent. His agent saw my movie. I gave him a videotape of it. It was screening at the LA Gay Film Festival, and it was selected for an LA Film Critics Award because of that screening, which all of it kind of like was, I forgot the question now.
Let me rephrase it.
It was,
if you're going into a studio and you have a sort of a Goodwill Hunting or a Milk scale of film to make, are you a different kind of director who goes into pitch? Is there a different Gus Van Sant that goes into the meetings than the one when you're needing to finance Last Days or Elephant?
I think pretty much everything is based on like their evaluation of the screenplay and the and whatever else you can.
But how can they know what you're going to give them? You're a chameleon. It's like it's like from Goodwill
they
Hunting
don't, and
to
I actually don't
Jerry.
A lot of, I usually am making my own things.
Yeah.
And people are hesitant with
It's
me.
like, oh God, what's it going to be this time?
Yeah, exactly. So, and they're afraid. I mean, I think everything works in averages in Los Angeles. So I've just barely even noticed it now, and I'm 65 now, so I'm like very late in the game, realizing that, you know, all the way through, I wasn't really concerned whether I was writing the screenplay or not. I wasn't concerned about whether I got a producer credit or not. But it's the only way that the business side of Hollywood can actually see what you've been responsible for. So when, like, Good Will Hunting, which I did not write and I did not produce, is the movie that makes the huge amount of money, and that's like my biggest playing card, there it works against me because I'm not one of the producers and I'm not one of the writers. And you know, they only can really base their decisions on your record, which is on IMDb. So
so the takeaway is get the credit.
The takeaway is like, just be careful, I guess. I wasn't very careful. I mean, I'm not sad about it or anything or disappointed about it. I've just started to realize, oh, this is what they're looking at. You know, like if I'm proposing that I write the screenplay for, which I did for, and I forgot the name of the project now. It was a bigger.
Don't worry, they won't get far on foot.
No, that one was very independent. That was very outside. But there was a Brad Pitt vehicle for New Line, and I did write a script. But also the Nick Sparks from The Notebook wrote a version as well after, and I thought, okay, between the two, they're gonna pick Nick Sparks because he has the track record, and my track record was maybe adapting Drugstore Cowboy, but those films were like making smaller amounts of money. So I guess maybe it's probably important to try and get the credits that you perhaps deserve, which I never really bothered with, like worrying about credits. I still kind of like don't really want to be worrying about credits, but it will work against you in the end with the business.
Do you have like management around you? I remember we were in contact once, like 20 years ago, and I used to call your dad. It's true.
Yeah, at that time I had an agent, but not a manager or anything.
There was something about accounts, we needed to pay you something, and it was like, oh, call my dad, he would email me.
My dad was my business manager, yeah.
And still no real big management agent, obviously. So you.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, that's a question. You know, like I guess it depends on whether how serious I want to be or one wants to be in the business. You kind of don't want to have too many people talking you into things, because then you're bound to say yes. And once things start going in a certain direction, then that's what you'll be doing, you know, like whatever it is. And you might not really want to be doing some of the things that the management might want you to be doing. I mean, if you do, you know, and some people might want that direction, you know. I've always kind of liked the idea that I don't have, you know, I'm coming up with my own stuff, usually. In the case of Don't Worry, You Won't Get Far on Foot, it's a movie that was really, even though the character is from Portland, Oregon, and I was familiar with him and his work, his cartoons. It was a Robin Williams project. He was the one who had optioned the book. He had set it up at Sony, and it was a big project at one point. It's just that it never got done. It just, time went by, and Robin never was able to commit time to do it. And or maybe there was other things involved. Maybe the studios and or his managers thought this isn't the right thing for you, or our screenplays weren't good enough for them, or whatever. But it never got done, and finally Robin was gone, and Sony was saying, we still have this project. So I kind of went back and I did write that one myself, and I wrote it myself, I think because I had been not writing them, and I realized there was something, that I was missing.
You wanted to get back to it. Is it easy enough if we go to the trailer for Don't Worry? Could you play that now for us? Just so you guys know what we're talking about.
The John Lennon song doesn't appear in the movie, but they used it in the
Great
trailer.
trailer. There was a question up the back there, yeah.
Is there a possibility to get somewhere your short film Four Boys in a Volvo, because I'm searching it for years and I can't find it nowhere and I urgently have to see.
Is it not online? It's not on YouTube?
I didn't find it on YouTube, no, to be honest.
There's a lot of short films that have never been, released. Maybe that's one of them. That was originally a Levi's commercial. So there's a 60-minute version that was a Levi's commercial, but I thought that one was online.
I didn't find it.
But you saw it? You saw it, or?
No, but I really want to see it for years.
You may have to call Levi's.
Sorry?
Yeah,
you may have to call Levi's.
It's kind of a kind of gray area in the world of, I guess, filmmakers that, sometimes you're working for Levi's, or you're making a video like I made a video for William Burroughs, and it starts to become like, I guess if I was better at keeping my files and so forth and releasing DVDs and so forth, I could have a collection maybe someday. Maybe the time's now, but
Would be great.
If there are any brilliant young startup distributors in the talents. Any more questions? Yes. Whoa, flying up. That one there was earlier, but yeah, thank you.
What do you look for in actors, and how much time and space do you dedicate to rehearsals?
The actors are usually sometimes you have people in mind from the beginning, like from the beginning of even writing something or thinking about something. Other times, like you're casting, I'm usually trying to find somebody that is going to best represent the character that we're looking for. I think one of the interesting examples on this new movie, Don't Worry, is Beth Ditto, who's a singer with The Gossip. She's gone off on her own now, but she came into a casting session, and I think she wasn't really able to do like a traditional reading of the lines with another person, but when she was talking off the cuff, just making, talking with you, or even talking as the character, she was amazing. So I think I'm usually looking for people that that can become the character, whether they're trained at doing that or not.
Can I add to that? Because there's a point at which you've worked with, say, Nicole Kidman in To Die For in a way that sort of pulled her out of a mainstream safe place where her career had gone. there are certain roles that you've offered people that may have been not necessarily the things that were expected of them in their next career point. Is that something you work with, like casting against type or pushing people to a different level?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes if you cast against type, sometimes that's the thing that makes it seem like it comes alive.
It's kind of amazing, yeah.
In the case of Nicole, we were thinking about using another actress, but she was busy, and we had to wait for 6 months or something like that. And Nicole was, at that time in her career, had done a movie with Tom Cruise, a couple of movies with Tom Cruise, but one with Ron Howard. And I think that it was really something where she really, really understood what the idea of the character was. And she really wanted to play it, like terribly badly. And so she called me directly while I was waiting for another actress. And she said, "I know you don't want me for this role, but I'm destined to play this part." And I thought, like, destined, the word destiny
You got me with destined.
Yeah. So I thought, I tried to say, no, it's not that we don't want you. And she goes, "Look, I know you don't want me." So she started bullying me, and I thought, yeah, maybe she'd be really good. So I think before the end of the call, or after the end of the call, I decided she should play the role.
Wow.
So she really, went for it. And there is the thing of the work that it's going to take to play a role like that. She seemed like she'd already done the homework, and she really did put a lot of time and energy into working into that character.
Good phone call.
Yeah.
There was a question there, and then here, and then here. And is there any, I'm sorry, I'm really not seeing you guys if you're up. Yes, there's some up there as well. First there. There, that guy.
Can please over there.
Sorry. And then we'll jump up to the top floor, because the light's in my eyes and I see you. Yeah. You. Could you? Yeah. But wait.
Yeah, hi, Gus. I have a question. A lot of your movies seem to be stories involving young people and people in their teens or early 20s. Where does your fascination with this age group come from?
I'm asked that question a lot. I can never really answer because I don't really think I'm aiming towards an age group, and whether or not all of the films really do or not. I think it's for storytelling, it's sometimes like an age of discovery, and so you're working with characters that sort of learn something during the story, and it's sometimes ends up to be that age group, but I'm not quite positive.
Does it have something to do? Can you hear me? Yeah. Does it have something to do with your own period in life in that sheltered town?
It could be, yeah. It could be totally me. It's just stuck in that age, which I probably am.
You're still waiting for the rite of passage to happen.
Yeah, that I relate to. Yeah, it could be.
Thanks. Let's have the question up there on the third floor.
Hello, Gus. I have a question about Russian cinematography. Are you interested, and do you know something maybe even about Soviet cinematography? And would you put anything about Russia or Russian character into your movies? Thank you.
Are you an actress?
Yes, I am.
Oh.
And I'm from Russia. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that Tarkovsky, hugely influential. What other Russian filmmakers? I mean, Russian cinema is very, very strong, and I think an influence. I've been to Russia, I think 3 times, St. Petersburg mostly, and I have some friends there. But I've always thought, Yeah, Russia, because of the northern lights, because in the summer it's light all day, and the light is quite low in the sky. It's very beautiful in St. Petersburg. But maybe someday.
The light's good, just still looking for the story. But he takes stories from anywhere, so maybe it's landed today. There were more questions. Oh, there's a question here from this man with the thing in white pocket in his check shirt. Over here, in the middle. He's been waiting.
It's like a second part to the last question. You have a very distinctive visual style and language to your films, and with your background in painting and art, your interest in photography, how do you go about choosing a cinematographer for your films? And have you used different cinematographers, or do you tend to use one in particular?
Well, one of my original cinematographers was Eric Edwards. He was, we made films together in high school, and we've done, he shot To Die For. But during the period I shot my very first movie, Mala Noche, Eric was planning to do it, but he became unavailable partly because he had some success with a film called Last Night at the Alamo, an Eagle Pennell film. That's right, way to say his name. And he became unavailable, and I remember desperately needing a local cinematographer for Mala Noche, and we all used to process our films at a local film lab, and John Campbell walked in with a camera over his shoulder, like the local news was shooting film, and they would come to the film lab to actually unload the magazine of the camera and give it to the lab to process and put it on TV that night. And John knew about my project and said he wanted to shoot it, and he had perfect. He had his camera with him, So I thought, wow, since I need somebody and this guy wants to do it, I said, "Aren't you working? You're working, obviously." And he's like, "I'll take a break. I need a break." So it took a month of break.
What about working with someone like Harris Savides and then losing that man when he passed away, that talent who was a close collaborator?
Harris he was 4 Boys in a Volvo. He was the DP on the Levi's commercial, and I met him because I was again looking for a DP, and my art director had just worked on a different Levi's commercial in Czechoslovakia with Harris. And he said, he's really committed. I think you'd like him. And I was, not sure. And he said, he shot all Madonna's videos. She won't do anything without him. And I thought, she must be pretty discerning, so I should probably use him. So it was because of Madonna, I think. But in using Harris, we sort of found like a kindred background of what we considered like our favorite things, and we kept working together until he passed away. Now there's a cinematographer, Hoyte van Hoytema, who did Dunkirk, and my friends are always pointing out that Hoyte reminds them, and now I just did a commercial with him, reminds me now of Harris. So, and independently, he's from Sweden, but they have very similar tastes and working styles. So, in some ways,
Netherlands.
Oh, he's from Netherlands, but he lived in.
He did,
Sweden.
but he's Dutch.
Yeah,
just have to
that's
say
right,
that.
he's Dutch.
Got to say that. Sorry.
That's right.
You may be related.
That's true, but he's been interesting to work with, and he's obviously
pretty good,
pretty busy. So I don't know if I'll always be able to work with him or not.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Here. Here, yeah. Oh, and there. Okay, here and there. That's the last one. Sorry.
Okay, so I'll be very quick then.
Yeah.
There are a lot of European directors going to the States, working for the States. In Hollywood, have you ever thought of coming to Europe to work?
Yeah, I have. I haven't made that move, but you know, I think it would be amazing to do something in Europe. I just haven't done. I shot a little bit in Rome. Part of my own private Idaho was in Rome, so that was kind of amazing. But yes, I have.
Okay. Yes.
Hello. Is it on?
You got
Hello?
the mic, yeah.
Hello. Okay. Well, as you mentioned, it's a lot of new platforms for film and cinema, and I was wondering, do you feel like they are ruining the way we watch cinema? And how do you see yourself being formed by this new thing that's going on? Do you see yourself doing cinema a different way, for example, in 10 years?
Yeah, it's a big question because yeah, it's you can find the money to back a project at Netflix, and then Netflix in particular is a company that seems to be very light on showing their product in cinemas, whereas Amazon's been making a really good effort. But yeah, it's all ending up online, and I really think, you know, just through the history of cinema, that a place like this hall here, whether or not it was originally a cinema or not, which it probably wasn't, but you know, was built around the technology of, you know, needing one, you know, the one print and one projector, and you needed everyone to gather around, which is really a nice way to actually see something together in a big group. But that the technology has just changed so that you're, you know, it's on your phone now. That just technology has changed, and changed maybe for the worse, like the way you see something, the way you watch something like a film, which is scary. But I'm not sure where it will lead. But I think this theater was built by the technology, and that, you know, the future technology is just different.
So as a kind of wrap-up, which we have to do, I could say that you'd like the films to be seen in a place like this, with a lot of people,
I mean,
on a big screen, and
obviously there's a lot of like value in seeing it together as a group, just because it's a group. You know, it's a meeting place, and yeah, I'm for that. But you know, I might be old-fashioned.
I think you're pretty safe saying it here in the middle of a film festival, which is all about groups coming together. And this was the Berlinale talents and friends from the festival. So I think you're in that crowded room full of people who believe in cinema, in projection spaces. But of course, it's going on everywhere else. But we have to wind up. So thank you, Gus Van Sant.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
I think we go this way, but take a bow.